I'm so happy for an opportunity to chat with my dear teacher, Scott Schwenk. Last time we connected was in November 2019, and we had an amazing podcast about mind training and living in the present moment. Scott is fantastic meditation and breathwork teacher. He helps people live more in the present moment and to let go of limiting beliefs that are preventing them from living a fulfilled lifestyle. Scott teaches people to live a more conscious and mindful way, to be mindful about their words and their actions and the consequences. He teaches his students to spread kindness and, most importantly, love. And today is the first day of Scott's course, Abundant Joy. I'm really excited for it. I already started my meditations and breathwork practices, and so much that I would like to ask Scott today. Scott, welcome to Think Clever podcast.
Thank you for having me. So good to be with you, Stas.
And I love the yantra in the back. It looks very beautiful.
Thank you.
Congratulations on launching Abundant Joy, online course with One Commune. I'm sure so much has gone into it, and I would love to ask why joy, why abundant joy, and how is it different from happiness, and then we'll go into other emotions as well.
Wonderful. So how it got started was really with me going through different periods of my life, feeling like there was more available than I was experiencing or having, whether that was materially in terms of, abundant material resources, health and vitality, experiencing giving and receiving abundant love, between friends or lovers or family, all the ways that life could feel more abundant. And the joy piece for me is several-fold. So I'll say something I don't think I've said in any of the commune recordings, which is when my teacher gave me a name in Sanskrit many years ago, Prahlad, Prahlad. One of the translations of Prahlad is great joy and delight. I was talking to my mentor teacher, Sally Kempton, last night, also previously known as Swami Durgananda, the bliss of the consciousness of the warrior goddess Durga. And we were talking about teaching and my teaching, and she was saying something about herself in a particular regard, and I responded, I said, yes, but you are and will always be Durgananda, that warrior goddess energy. Even though, because she refrains from giving advice to people unless they very strongly ask for it, especially anything about their own character. She keeps it very demure. And so I said, yes, but that energy is always pulsing. She said, I'm not a very confrontational person. I said, yes, but the force of your presence does all of that. It's very confrontational. And then in the next breath, I said, it dawns on me that I was named Prahlad, and that my expression is, and my study is meant to be about great joy and delight. When you're given a name traditionally in these Eastern traditions, probably in indigenous traditions as well, oftentimes the name is aspirational. You're meant to grow into it. And it can function like a mantra, a powerful word that can transform consciousness. So the joy really actually comes through the lineage of teachers that have been training me and empowering me more than I even realized. That's one piece. The other piece is I've realized over probably the last 10 years that I've observed that joy seems to be a very condensed, intensified form of love. So you've heard me say for years, Stas, love is the whole story. So I would say that joy, love, contentment, happiness, stillness, tranquility, equipoise are all rays of one light, flavors of one totally free consciousness that lives within all of us in seed form in the particles. If we strip down from cell to molecule to atom to particle and go to the center of the particle, the power center, that's where everything happens from in all of life. That's where the dance of form and formlessness are constantly undulating in us, as us, for us, through us, with us. So to make more and more direct contact through awareness of that power center is to be the beneficiary of its qualities, its rays, joy, love, happiness, and so on. And then on a practical level, when quarantine began and COVID began to spread and the economies were rattled deeply, I'd been through that myself in a very personal way about 7, 8 years ago. A period of time that it seemed like my financial world was collapsing. And at that time, I picked up a little book called The Abundance Book by John Randolph Price. After a couple of years of having it recommended, I decided to get it and work deeply with it daily. In tandem with these written lessons by a now deceased friend who's written a transformative home study course for 50 years. And in its current iteration, you get 2 lessons a month, and it's threaded through in his own words with the law of attraction. Many years ago, I'd read and studied a unity book called Spiritual Economics by Eric Butterworth. Napoleon Hill, many years before that, Think and Grow Rich. They're all saying the same thing from different places, and all saying and giving plenty of examples of people who were very prosperous in many ways, even in economic downturns. And what did they all have in common? Aligning, making contact with the power, the true power, maintaining an interior state of love, intense love, joy, and gratefulness, and giving up all thoughts to the contrary, giving up criticizing, complaining, and gossiping, and being sensitized throughout the day to being guided from within through this contact, alignment, and flow. Being sensitized enough to be guided and being obedient to that guidance. And it's not a person that's providing the guidance or a discarnate spirit necessarily. It's the flow of energy. Whatever state of consciousness I'm aligned with is going to form my thoughts. It's going to form my body sensations. It's going to form my worldview. So as I make a habit of practicing intense states of love, joy, gratefulness, I'm aligning more and more deeply with a greater coherency. Certainly more coherent than my ordinary human brain. And the life I grew up in with a mom who clipped every coupon from the newspaper and had a big bag of coupons to go to the grocery store with. And if we didn't have a coupon, we didn't buy it. So I was surrounded and educated with a lack mentality on both sides of the family, father and mother. So I was given the perfect circumstances, like so many of us, to see what I didn't want. And then this inner something that knew there was more available. I didn't know how to get it. A lot of trial and error, grasping, clinging. So long story short, that's some of the material that really has inspired the creation of this course. And I really, in truth, I can't even call it my course, because whose was the information before it came to me? How can I be somehow the owner of it?
Well, thank you so much for creating that. And I'm excited to follow the entire 21-day journey. and develop some habits of abundance, because it's something that I could use more in my life as well. As I'm doing more work, I'm realizing that there's a scarcity of certain feelings in my life, of love and happiness. I'm writing a book about happiness, and I realized that I've been chasing it. It's not something that a person should be chasing, but I have been trying to experience that feeling of joy and inner peace a lot more than I currently do. And you know, in our recent breathwork session, you said something very important that resonated with me. You mentioned we were talking about anger, and you said that anger obstructs us from our clarity, and it's very difficult to speak clearly and to feel our intuition when we're angry. And I've been feeling that due to what's going on in the world, there's been a lot of people who are very angry and upset and very irritated. So it's very difficult to tap into this flow state, tap into this unconditional love, and to experience abundance in life. And I wanted to ask you, how do we process these emotions correctly? How do we process anger? How do we process sadness? How can we do that correctly?
So one thing that would be important to set up to talk about that is we exist in multiple forms all at the same time. So the tantric sages, and that's the path that I walk and teach, is Tantra, Kashmiri Tantra, from the perspective of what's called non-duality, meaning there's not two or more things. There's one thing appearing as many. And so on one perspective that we can learn to access, nothing is happening at all. Nothing is happening, nothing's right or wrong. It's just suchness, just is. And it's whole and it's complete. Within that is the appearance, these temporary appearances of galaxies and planets and black holes, and on this planet, humans with specific lifespans, preferences and aversions, attachment. It's very important that a mother have a level of attachment to her child so that she'll care for the child till the child can live on its own, whether that's an animal or a so-called human, even though these are animal bodies we're walking around in. So attachment serves a purpose, and then when there's a loss or a sudden change to something we're connected to in a deep way, an attachment. Speaking for myself, as I mentioned before we started the recording, my mother passed away October 14th, a year ago, from cancer after a long journey with cancer. And I was there with her in hospice, and it's still painful. So both things are true at the same time. I can sense the unbroken wholeness of all of reality to the degree that I can. And at the same time, I'm this son who's lost his primary caregiver, his primary attachment. And there's an ache in my chest, and I think about it every day. I want to call her every day. And there's a moment each day when I think to call her briefly, it's so quick, and then recognize that she's not there to call in that way. That's real. We had this training last year, the beginning training of the power of presence that I was giving. And one of the books that everyone was reading was the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And one of the great masters in there, one of the greatest masters of the 20th century, his son died. And somebody went to him and said, Rinpoche, which is named for great teacher, Rinpoche, you teach us that all of this material existence is an illusion. So how can you be crying? He was crying over the loss of his son. How can you be crying over the loss of your son? And Rinpoche said, yes, that's true. And the loss of a child is a super illusion. And I'm going to feel it thoroughly. This isn't immediately obvious, if you haven't been doing these kind of contemplations about life, that we can have the experience of being one with all of existence at the same time as being upset over a breakup, upset over a death, a loss. So in terms of processing emotions, we need to give ourselves a lot more compassion. Compassion to feel what we're feeling without adding to it. Grief needs to be felt, or it will become issues in the body or issues in the psychology. Anger suppressed can become a lot of pain in the low back. It can become liver issues, developing like all sorts of things in Chinese medicine. Sadness, not processed, can really wreak havoc on the colon and lungs in Chinese medicine. So the how of processing, I feel the most elegant way to work with things that are arising is with the breath. And it's not always appropriate to do, the more intense rhythmic breathing through the mouth that I call ecstatic breath work, or Wim Hof has his version that's, rather intense, or rebirthing. Some of these connected breathing, they're more intense, holotropic breath work. It's not always the best thing to do. So this is why in the 7 days of the main part of the course, each day there's a micro breathing practice. Day one, the grounding breath for soothing anxiety. If I'm really, really anxious and my mind is just spinning, I'm not going to be really available to skillfully process an emotion as it's arising. I'm going to overthink and I'm going to feel worse. So the first step of processing an emotion, I think, is to slow down in the moment, to really slow down more, slow down really intensely, like just slow down. And the best way to do that is with the breath. The longer and the thinner we make the exhalation, the more the thinking mind stream slows down, and it gets easier to see things more as they are, rather than colored by the conditioned mind. And as I see things as they are, I go, oh, wait, if I take the story out of why I think I'm angry, sad, or afraid, and I just find, where am I feeling this feeling in my body? It's just energy. If it doesn't have a story, it's just energy, and it's not a problem. And progressively, I build comfort as I work like this to see it that way. So they no longer become these monsters that I'm so scared of having arise in me and avoiding. They become information. In an animal body, emotion is an epiphenomenon of the biology of an animal body, meant to adjust behavior in the moment and then be moved on from. Most animals, like if you look at the dogs at the dog park, if they get upset with another dog, it's not for long until the task is accomplished of either I won the bone or you won the bone. And then they shake and they breathe. If we would shake and breathe skillfully, we could release a lot.
Yeah.
So that's a little window into processing these emotions, but not making them wrong, not making them right or wrong. I have the right to feel whatever's arising. I'm not a good or a bad person. It's how I handle it. And as I said yesterday in the class you were referring to that we were in together, there's nothing bad about anger. It's a heated state of arousal on the heels of feeling thwarted or wronged with the intention to do something about it. That's not bad. It's a motivating force if it can be used well. But if I start to project anger at somebody, that's where I start creating karma I don't want. I'm setting energy into motion. I'm putting causes and conditions for more unpleasantness into motion as I direct anger at another person or blame them for my fear or sadness. That's going to come back again and again and again. And that's why the Buddhists talk about the wheel of suffering, the wheel of birth and death. It just keeps turning. And the whole idea is to recognize that, see the causes of that, and get off the wheel and stabilize in wakeful awareness. And that doesn't mean we're not going to feel. Doesn't mean we're not going to cry when somebody we care about dies or is hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been exploring anger a lot recently in different forms, how it manifests itself, and criticizing and blaming people is definitely a huge one. It's not very obvious, you know. So sometimes it's very difficult to say that it's I'm channeling anger when I'm criticizing or blaming, but I am. And then I also have been suggested recently to start practicing non-judgment and non-comparison, and that's very. I realized as I was doing that, as I was being more mindful of practicing that, I realized that constantly judging the experience, whether it's good or bad, it didn't really allow me to be in the present moment. I was always somewhere, and I never really was truly satisfied with the moment. The same way as comparison, comparing myself to other people, comparing myself to myself. So there was always this very difficult to be still in those feelings, and I wanted to. I mean, you kind of touched on some of this already, but I wanted to ask you more about comparison, because I think right now more than ever, with social media, everybody's comparing and not really feeling very worthy of things. How do we embrace our uniqueness? How do we be more of ourselves and compare less to others?
First of all, I think it could be helpful to recognize the source of the behavior of comparison. And if one looks inward, we could perhaps see that why would I compare in the very first place? What would lead me to look outward to compare myself to anything or anyone in the very first place? What's the cause of that within me?
Lack of self-love.
Lack, just lack, the sense of lack, which is false. If it's true that everything is manifesting within one consciousness, then how could I lack anything? If I'm relaxed open to my full identity as consciousness, how could I lack anything? And if it's true, which it seems to be in my experience, that all the powers of the divine live within each of us because there's no separation, then every thought I'm thinking is actively shaping and directing energy. Every single thought. So if I believe something's missing, that will be my experience. And then the more often I say it to myself and other people, it will get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. Some people have a story about themselves in relationship to money that they can never get ahead, and that will be their experience. Some people have a story about relationships. I can never get with the right person, and that will be their experience. It'll be a roller coaster, and that we want seems to be elusive. And what there is to do is to slow down enough with significant practice to see, what am I doing with my thoughts? What am I doing with my thoughts? How do I describe things to myself and other people? Can I see how that creates feeling states? Can I see how I've been participating in the same storylines with little variation and the same feeling states for many years? And what happens if I spent 21 days actively practicing non-comparing, non-judging, non-competing, basically giving up all forms of criticizing, complaining, and gossiping, including about myself to myself, which is a big one. Actively practicing everything is divine exactly as it is, and certain things could use some improvement. But what starts to happen to my physiology, just even in the moment of really considering it? Does my breath get deeper? These are feedback loops. The body provides some really useful feedback loops. The breath is a great place to look. How am I breathing is how I'm living. However you're breathing is how you're living. And really, you and I are only one or two breaths away from a different state of mind. And then to be consistent about that. But the thought loops you're talking about, the thought loops, how many people pretty much are living the same day over and over again for many years? It doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way. What we benefit from, what I benefit from, is finding ways to keep myself inspired to do the inner work of upgrading my thoughts and my inner feeling state. Whether that's keeping, beautiful, inspirational pieces like this yantra, which is emblematic of the energy of abundance itself, known in Hinduism as Lakshmi, fullness in all forms, or whether it's a collage, or whether it's a photo of a place that reminds me of a certain feeling I'm choosing to practice and tune into and anchor. But to use my environment to remind me as I'm training. All the things that we believe suck about ourselves in life, we learned that somewhere. Well, if you look at how we did that, television stories, social media, newspapers, other people's words, well, we could reverse engineer and go the other direction towards our greater good, which I believe is the highest form of social activism. Given that moods are contagious, one of the best things I can do is to grow up more deeply and wake up more fully and practice abundant joy as best I can. And if I have the karma to be a teacher, fine, but most of us don't. Just live my life and know that the mirror neurons, head to toe, and every other body are going to pick up whatever my inner state is. So I can be the change I wish to see in the world. And then we might have some hope of seeing it in the world.
I love it. Yeah. I think part of the growing up that you're teaching people, something that I discovered recently for myself, is taking responsibility for my inner state. I always I take responsibility at work. There's so many ways how I take responsibility, but for some reason, not for my inner state. That one, I gave away the power to the external forces, that it's based on the weather, based on my nutrition, based on this and that. And I realized that, I've been on the path of forming different habits for a while now, and some were successful, some were not so much. You helped me with a lot of great habits to form. And I realized that the key to actually being consistent with a habit and forming something, a long lasting change, is it's that responsibility. It's realizing that nobody's there to help. Nobody's going to come and save. It's all up to us. The inner state, how we feel, how we show up every day. And before, I didn't quite fully integrate your mantra of waking up, growing up, cleaning up. What was the first one? Showing up. Showing up, yeah. And just recently, with so much happening in the world and in my life, I realized that's what Scott is talking about. It's all us. We have all the power to either have an abundant, happy life, or be suffering and be comfortable in the suffering.
Yeah, and we do, as you say, we do get, even though it's not really cozy, we get comfortable or familiar, so familiar that it just seems like, oh, that's just how life is. No, it doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way. I read a number of entries from my mom's journals since she passed, and it really has given me a greater understanding of who she was, where she came from, and how much she grew, and the places where she was stuck. And throughout the journals that span the period of about 30 some odd years, there's some recurring themes. And she had a very self-critical inner voice that would lead her to feel that other people thought that way about her too. And it was a cause of suffering. And as an observer reading the journals, it's easy to see, like, and I knew her. So you don't need to think those ways about yourself. But until a person actually takes it on and dismantles the pattern, and it takes time. It takes time. I mean, 21 days is a good start, but I would say go for 121 days, or 1,021 days. Really, it's like, what else are we going to do with our lives? More buying and selling? Like, really, why are we here? We've got this window. None of us knows how long, really, unless you do, and that's probably rare. How long are we going to be here? Before quarantine, I would Google once in a while and see how many people die every day. Just super curious. And it was like 300,000 to 500,000 people on the planet pass away every day. How many of them knew today was going to be their last day when they woke up? And if somebody asked each one of them, did you do what you came here to do? Did you become what you came here to become? Did you grow in the ways that you came here to grow? That you manifested in here, this realm to grow? So I lived with that question, and you, Stas, have heard me ask this a lot on retreat, from Suzuki Roshi, who opened the San Francisco Zen Center in the 70s, brilliant, brilliant meditation master. And he said, death is certain. The time is not. What is the most important thing? And are you attending to it? What is the most important thing? So for me, that comes back to love. When I watched my mom trying to pass out of her body, it took a while. It's hard work dying, really. If you've gotten to watch, the privilege of watching and holding space, it's hard work. Whatever traumas and contracted states we've carried in life we haven't resolved, we meet them in trying to leave the body. They can make it really difficult and painful to let the body go. And I saw two things were really important. Breath, without which the body becomes a corpse, and love, without which I don't see the point of being alive. Without love, I don't see why I'd be here. Mm. So we can train in them now instead of wait till we're in hospice.
Yeah. How do we train ourselves in the conscious way so we don't have to repeat the same mistakes over and over? I know that we come here with certain karmic objectives, certain lessons to learn, and it can take a lifetime to learn the same lesson. How do we not get stuck repeating this over and over and kind of make it more fun, learning various lessons and learning faster?
Well, one thing is, and this might not sound like the fun part yet, what's lacking is discipline. And the root of discipline is discipleship. What are you a disciple of? Many people are a disciple of money, chasing money. It's been said in different ways, in different places, if people put as much focus on their waking up and growing up process, and fitting it to my own methodology, as they do to their careers, it would happen very quickly. I know, and a number of people who've created startups. And with a startup, generally it's boots on the ground. It's a lot of elbow grease, it's a lot of sweat and blood and tears and late nights often. If that same commitment to excellence, to doing complete work, was brought to one's health and well-being, it would happen very quickly. And it's important to be practicing the feeling I would feel or imagine I'd feel if it was already so. And this is one of the keys of the law of attraction that we unpack in the course. And other teachers have unpacked it in their own way. I don't have a chance of having what I'm wanting the manifestation of if I'm not actively practicing the feeling I would feel if I already had it. So no matter how difficult your moments are, how sad or brokenhearted I might be, if I want something different, I have to practice the feeling I would feel if I already had it, if I want any chance of having the manifestation. And that's where the discipline is missing. Most of us have some space that we occupy whether it's a tiny little space or a big space or the space on our phone, we can use the spaces around us to remind us of what we're choosing to focus on and get really serious about it. Death is certain, the time is not. What is the most important thing? And as you've been learning over the years, and definitely me, there's a difference between diligence and chasing and grasping. And to daily notice that, to daily discern the difference. Am I being diligent and focused and disciplined, or am I chasing and grasping from a sense of lack? Chasing and grasping is like swimming hard after a beach ball in the swimming pool, and the momentum of my chasing so hard pushes it further and further away.
I was just about to ask you if you could share some core principles, some fundamental beliefs, or your personal truths about the structure of the universe and how to apply it throughout our days. And you just mentioned one, not to grasp. And I think sometimes we want something so bad we become just obsessed, and it's becoming further and further. So definitely not chasing so much and being more mindful of our inner state.
Yes, and what you just said, sometimes we want something so much, but if we look at what we're getting, we see what we actually did want. We might not say we wanted to feel lack, but if we're continuing to create it, that's what we actually, our ego structure has been wanting. It's more familiar than abundance until it isn't. Suffering is more familiar than love for most people. So it takes a lot of work to learn what love really feels like, and then to align with it and choose relationships of friends, lovers, colleagues, family that are loving, instead of looking, well, they're attractive, they smile nice, they have enough money, they seem to say nice things to me. Yes, but look a little closer. Do they love for a so-called reason, or do they just love? How does it feel to sit with this person in silence without grasping or expecting or chasing? How does it feel? What's the energy feel like? If it doesn't feel like love, it probably isn't. Doesn't mean they're a bad person, but there's 7+ billion people all over the planet. Surely there's 4 or 5 or more who we can resonate with, who are actively choosing to grow. And that's where the sweet spot is, I say. You become who you hang around. I become who I hang around. And there's a minimum of 2 parts to that statement. I become who I hang around. Who I hang around physically, to include the objects I hang out with, and what I hang around with inside. What do I feed with my breath and my attention inside? What company am I keeping inside? I will become that. If you hang out with people who are constantly upset and criticizing and complaining about the food at the restaurant or how the server served, and always complaining, you're likely to become that way. If we're with people who are honestly striving and growing and doing the best to keep alchemizing things as they arise, practicing love, practicing non-judgment, it's going to give lift to our practice. One of the benefits of my current course is that Commune has only done this for a couple other teachers. They created a specific portal for our course to have a community. It's growing every day. When I checked it yesterday early in the day, there was 250 people in there so far. It keeps growing. And there's a power to community. It reminds us of what we're striving for. And it's possible, and there's an energy that's palpable. Even though it might not be a physical house or a physical studio, it's just as real. It's a virtual, vibrating temple space made up of all the offerings that everyone's bringing. the power of community. And a community could just be one other person. You don't need to have 20. Like an accountability buddy. Like, hey, did you do your practices today? With love. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. Okay, well, do you want to do them now? I'll do a second set of practices. Sure, thanks for the inspiration. Wow.
Yeah. I have an accountability partner, not for the spiritual work, but more of a business work, and we get so much done because I know once a week we're gonna have a call, and I'm gonna have to show up and do my work. It does miracles. Scott, I wanted to ask you to send us off with a couple of suggestions on self-love practices. I think it's something that we can, if we have self-love, if we have love for ourselves, then we can have it for other people. And so if we can start the day or do it throughout the day, something that you do yourself, maybe you can recommend a few things.
Number one, in my practices, I've taken a lot of support from working in the mirror, standing in a mirror, eye gazing with myself, looking past the form of the face and any thoughts I might have about the body into the pupils, into the eyes, until I sense the living force behind the eyes in the mirror and connect it with the living force in my body. And it becomes like a circle. And then do my best to generate love and compassion and receive love and compassion same time. If I'm not feeling particularly loving and compassionate, I pause long enough in the mirror to get a memory of a time that I did feel loving and compassionate till I start to feel the feeling, and then it's working, and then I breathe into it to magnify it, and do this every day. I did this every day for chunks of time. I now do it occasionally, and I don't need to do it every day. I have a feeling of love that I can generate towards myself. And it's very important that if you're not feeling loving towards yourself yet, that you don't make yourself wrong or think that this is not available to you. Start with simple kindness. You could ask yourself, what would a kind person say to a suffering person? And I can start to talk to myself in those ways. Even if it starts to feel foreign in the beginning, it will grow with practice. The first time most people stand in a one-legged yoga pose, you're shaking and wobbling. And any good teacher will tell you that's part of the brain and nervous system learning how to become balanced. You want to keep doing it, even though it doesn't look like you want it to look yet. You're still actually accomplishing something by showing up and attempting to practice as best you can. So start with kindness. Then kindness can move into compassion. Can I have compassion? If somebody else I was looking at that I care about was going through the feelings or experiences that I currently am going through, would I feel compassion for this other person I say I care about, my mom or my lover or my child, animal? Until I begin to feel that compassion, and I can irradiate my body and mind with that compassion as a practice. The same way that the sun, if I go outside on my roof right now, it will irradiate my body with heat and light. And I just receive it. So from compassion, then I can start to feel love. And it's important to tease out, compassion and empathy are two different things. Empathy comes from the mirror neurons in our body that can sense what another person is feeling. It's how we can feel into another and understand their pain or their suffering or their joy. We can feel what another person is feeling physically and or emotionally. If we go too deep into that, we end up in what Roshi Joan Halifax, the Zen teacher, calls empathic distress. Empathic distress. It's too much empathy. Compassion is more neutral. It comes from source. It's not personal. And often compassion is confused with pity. Pity is fear-based. Pity is like walking past the homeless person who seems crazy and being a bit fearful and being, oh, I don't want to be that. And we think we're directing compassion, but it's really fear and pity. So we can go from kindness to compassion to love. As love intensifies, we can start to experience and explore the beginnings of joy. What the great Hasidic teacher, the Baal Shem Tov in Europe, called causeless joy.
Mm.
Causeless joy. He would dance in the streets. This joy would just rise in him. Causeless joy. It lives within us in seed form already. We don't need to go get it. We don't need somebody to pour it on our head. So just even starting with the idea or the memory or hearing me say, the possibility of self-love is already in you. The more I relax, the more I can open to it. The more tense I get about accomplishing it, the more I push it away, like swimming after the beach ball in the pool.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Scott. You have such clarity. You're able to distinguish between all of these feelings, and it's so intricate, and you have this clarity to explain it so well. Thank you so much. And I also want to say thank you for really stepping up when the whole pandemic started. You became very active on social media platforms and sharing and giving so many lessons, and it has been very important, because in those moments people were looking for support, for grounding, for guidance, and you were there for that, and I was it helped me a lot. So thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for your curiosity. Thank you for your discipline and your commitment, and that you are truly passionate about spreading love and kindness.
I keep growing. I do my best every day. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for practicing and for creating this podcast for people to get an opportunity to hear about things they might not otherwise hear about. To think more clever.
More to come. Thank you, Scott.